This is Spare Time Repair, and this is an Audio Technica AT-LP60X turntable. I already own the AT-LP3 from the same company, and when I found this in a salvage yard, I initially thought it might potentially be an upgrade for my existing player. Sadly, it is in fact an entry-level turntable aimed at casual users. There's no user-adjustable counterweight or anti-skating settings, and the cartridge is non-replaceable, unlike more expensive turntables that have removable head shells. I also don't like that it doesn't have RCA sockets or even a fixed RCA lead. Instead, you have a 3.5mm jack that you have to plug an adapter cable into, so there's also no grounding spade connector. This is a fully automatic device, meaning that you can press the start button on the front and it should start playing a record with no further user input, provided that you've selected the correct speed and record size. I say it should do that because this particular example has a problem. Although the queuing arm works as it should, and you can start playing a record manually without issue, once the end of the side is reached, the tone arm returns to the home position without lifting itself, dragging the stylus across the record, damaging both and making a horrible sound. Similarly, if you press the start button, the tone arm moves to the playing position without raising itself, clattering into the edge of the record. Since there's no fully manual option, the player in its current state is unusable. Aside from that, it's in very good condition with only a few minor scuffs on the lid. It doesn't appear to have seen much use, but perhaps it developed this fault too late to be returned within warranty. If I can get it fixed, then I'm sure I'll be able to sell it for maybe 3 times what I paid for it. But there's also a chance that the stylus is damaged from being dragged across a few records, in which case it will need replacing at the cost of $26. Obviously I need to flip this upside down, so I'm going to secure the tone arm to the stand with a bit of white tack. Remove the platter mat and the 45 adapter, which has a nice little cutout so that you can flip it up, which I like. I'll just put down something soft so I don't scratch the lid. Well, the platter's just fallen off the spindle, which I should have anticipated. So I'll just remove that. So I've got 3 potentiometers here. One presumably for the line in. One that says RET, is that the return mechanism? Do we just need to adjust something there? And SW, what might that be? We've also got trimmer pots for the 45 and 33 speed adjustment. And some interesting placement for the 2 other feet. They obviously decided that was the only place they could put them. I don't think I need to remove the rubber feet themselves because there's screws either side of those. And in fact, I don't even need to remove those. So I'm going to put those back in. So I'll just try these ones instead. Still not lifting up, so maybe I do need to remove these rear 2 feet. Yes. Well, the remarkable thing is how flimsy it all looks. These linkage wires are so thin. So this is the queuing arm. And I thought these were potentiometers, but they're not. They're just purely plastic standoffs. So they're all offset cams, and they're just going to be adjusting various elements of the return mechanism. So SW is going to be this one, and that's just adjusting the position at which it opens this leaf switch here. So the switch is currently open. And if I were to turn this, it's going to close it. This whole piece here is connected to the tone arm, so that's going to determine when the record, or when the motor stops spinning, when the tone arm is moved. So I'm moving the tone arm now, and when it's back to its resting position, it opens the switch and turns off the motor. So if I move the tone arm further across, it's now as far as it can go towards the center of the record. So that's when this post is going to interact with this lever here and start the auto return mechanism. So yeah, that was the one that was labeled RET. So that just fine tunes when the tone arm is going to lift. And the other one that was labeled L in is this one. So it's not line in, is it lead in? Then we've got another leaf switch here. If I cock this back, it opens that switch up. And then if I press the start button, which is this linkage here, it flicks this across, connects these contacts, and begins the mechanical process. This is the record size lever that I'm moving. This is 12-inch, this is 7-inch, and on the far side here, this is the queuing arm. So that's where we've got the issue. Then in the front right corner here, this is the speed adjustment, and all that's doing is making this contact, which goes directly to the motor, tells it to speed up. So I'm just going to temporarily put the base back on and flip it over. We have more adjustment cams here. That's the record size selector. There is a screw here, but is that an adjustment or is that just for fastening it? I think it is an adjustment because if we flip it over, I think it adjusts how much tension there is on this spring. So I've got a screwdriver in there now. Let's see what that does. Tighten that maybe a turn and a half. So let's pop the platter back on and hook the belt over the motor pulley. I've fitted a stylus guard from my other turntable just to protect it. It doesn't fit properly, but it's good enough. So if I press the start button now, yeah, it's still not working. In fact, now it's not even moving over to the record. If I move it over manually, it's clearly still not working. In fact, it's worse than it was before, because now it's not even reaching the tonearm stand. So it helped to understand what's going on here. This whole mechanism seems simple in some ways and very complex in others. So let's initiate the sequence without the platter. I'm going to put a little mark on the motor spindle, so you can hopefully see when that's spinning. So we move the tonearm across, motor starts spinning, and then when it gets to a certain point, this moves, starts moving this, which is sending the tonearm back to its resting position. Presumably that keeps going until it reaches this gap in the cog, and then the motor stops. But at some point in that process, the cueing arm should be engaged. So looking at the underside again, this is the metal plate that the tonearm spring is connected to, the one that we just tensioned up. This plate here is ramped. It's got a slope on it here. So during the process, this plate moves outwards. That's what forces this piston down, which lifts the tonearm. And that's completely separate from this, which is the cueing arm. So that's why one is working and not the other. The question is, why is the tonearm not lifting sufficiently when this plate moves across? So I think I need to manually engage the process again until this plate has moved into a position here, and then I can adjust this tonearm piston to be at the correct height to lift it off the record. So I'm manually doing the process again. You can see that plate starting to move. So when it's here, the tonearm should be fully lifted off the record. So if I stop there and flip it over again, see the tonearm should now be in a raised position, but it isn't. See, this part here has lifted, but not sufficiently. So if I raise it manually, this is where it should be. But if I let go, it just drops back down again. But if I use the cueing button, it goes up and it stays up. So when I tightened that screw earlier, was I going the wrong way? I think I was. Because now I've undone it and it's raised up. So if we now complete the cycle, now it drops down. I think that was it. I think it's now fixed. So the cueing lever works well. Now let's start the automatic process. Well, that clearly works fine. Just move the tonearm across to near the end of the side. So after all that, I didn't even need to take the bottom cover off. It was all in that screw there. So if you're having the same issue, all you have to do is loosen that screw by a couple of turns. So everything is operationally fine, but I've just given it a sound test and it sounded absolutely terrible. Very tinny, no bass at all. And I'm going to give Audio-Technica the benefit of the doubt and say that it's stylus damage rather than just a poor quality product. But to me it sounded just like you'd expect one of those Crossley suitcase type record players to sound. But the stylus isn't branded. Other examples of this turntable I've seen have shown the Audio-Technica logo on the front of the stylus there. So it's possible that the previous user suffered damage with that and replaced it with a cheap knockoff. I'm only speculating, but this thing sounds like garbage. I removed the stylus and tried looking at it through a magnifying loupe. I also tried recording that with my phone, which was very difficult, but I'll show you the footage I did get. And it's hard to tell whether it's damaged or not really. But there's also no markings on this to identify it as an Audio-Technica stylus. So regardless of that, I'm going to check the speed. And it looks to be pretty good. So according to the RPM Wow app, on 33 RPM, it's basically running at exactly the right speed, and the fluctuation is pretty minimal as well. 45 looks promising too. Yep, that's just 1/4% fast with a wow of just 0.07%. So no adjustment necessary. To my surprise, the stylus from my other turntable is compatible with this one. So I've just fitted it, and the difference is night and day. This isn't even a good stylus. It's a few years old and long overdue for a replacement, but it still sounds way better than the white one. And because this turntable has a 3.5mm output jack, I can use this cable to connect it directly to the camera's microphone input and give you a direct feed. So I'm going to play you a little bit of this record using both styluses and do a side-by-side comparison. Just pausing here to tell you that the video originally had about 30 seconds of back and forth comparison, but it got pulled for copyright. So I'm going to have to dramatically truncate that, but hopefully it's still enough to tell the difference. I'm now pretty convinced that this white stylus is not the original one, so I'm just trying to figure out what happened. Because if the original stylus got ruined by being dragged across records, why would you bother replacing it? Because surely you know the same thing's going to just happen again. I wonder if they kept the original stylus and thought they couldn't donate it without a stylus and therefore just bought the cheapest knockoff they could find on eBay. I just want to jump in here while editing to show you that I took a photo of the white stylus to compare it with the Audio-Technica, and it's very clearly an inferior copy. So I've got no doubt that a new AT-LP60 out of the box would not have the same sound issues that I've experienced here. In fact, what I should do is buy a new stylus for my main turntable since it's overdue replacement, fit this one to this turntable, and then at least I could sell it in good conscience knowing that it had at least a half-decent stylus. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.